Well, hello, Nate.
Hello, Greg. Hello, everybody out there on the internet. Welcome once again to our bi weekly What's This Bird live program. My name is Nate Swick. I'm joined by my ABA colleague, Greg Neise, and we are here to talk about some birds. Greg, we're going to talk about some birds. It's spring. Is it spring enough where you are? It's sort of
You know,
spring y
you know
where I
what?
am.
If you paid attention to the weather here, not really. I suppose for March,
Yeah.
actually, I take that back. For March, it's pretty much it's right on the money for March. The robins are singing all night long, so
Yeah.
yeah, it's spring.
Well, we went this week. This was the week where we in the Southeast went from very cold overnight freezing warnings to it is 65 degrees, 70 degrees, and the trees have just decided to leaf out immediately. This is the week, and this is the week that spring came, and everyone's allergies are reacting accordingly. Um, yeah, so we're gonna talk about some birds here. We're gonna talk about some bird identification here. What we do in this "What's This Bird" program, as we sort of wait for folks to trickle in on our various online internet social media platforms that we're streaming this to. The American Birding Association hosts a number of Facebook groups, one of which is called "What's This Bird." It is a live uh, friendly, real time bird identification community wherein people can take photos of birds that they have seen in their yards, at their birding, and anywhere in the world,
Anywhere in
actually,
the world, we'll
and
give it a shot.
anywhere in the world. Yeah, and bring it over to the group, post it on the group in our community of friendly birders and admins and all the folks that make that group run will help you identify that bird frequently, very, very quickly. But
Very
from time
quickly.
to time, yeah, shockingly quickly sometimes. Um, but from time to time, we get some interesting identifications that we'd like to walk through in a more formal setting. And that's what Greg and I are here to do. Hello to everybody who is coming in. We're going to get to that in just a second. What we usually do is we'll grab a few photos, we'll talk through the
Yep.
identifications, and we'll take questions. And if you all have any sort of questions, comments, questions about birding, please let us know in the comments, please. This is always
Yes.
fun when we have some interaction going on. That's the advantage of this live system that we have going on here.
Absolutely. I'm watching Facebook, and Nate is watching Twitter and YouTube. So if you've got something you want to say, just say hello. Drop something in the comments, and we will get to you. Um,
Yeah,
and
where are
we've
you
already got
at? How's spring coming along? March is the we're all very much looking forward to the end of March. That's when things really start to happen across most of the ABA area.
well. We had a
Maybe not for
thing
you.
happen. We had a thing happen here since the last time I saw you.
Yeah.
Um, and it made some news.
Oh,
So
yeah, that's right.
yeah, so
Greg got the world's most public dip.
we'll just talk about that for a
Yeah,
second.
let's talk about that.
Um,
Look at that.
I
Look at that handsome man on the
look
front
at that,
cover of the Chicago Tribune.
well, that picture was actually on page 6, but
Oh,
the
page six.
Ross's
Right.
the Ross's gull, the story made the front page of the Chicago Tribune last Friday. A Ross's gull was found on the south side of Chicago a week ago Saturday. Um,
The
and
birdiest part of town,
uh,
according to Jim Crow. Gee, that's
and
terrible. I'm sorry. That was
that's Jim Croce. Um,
Jim Croce. Exactly.
I
He's the
got
birder. The birder version.
that's me trying
It
to
has
ignore you.
levels. They have
That's just
levels.
I got it. Um, and
Awful.
I the
Awful.
on Saturday when it showed up, it put on a show at one of the beaches down there, and over 200 people got to see it. It was feeding in the surf 30 feet away. Beautiful first cycle bird. You can kind of see the picture of it there on the front page of the paper there.
That's almost as good as the photos we try to tackle here in this
Yeah,
spot there.
taken by my birding brother Tom Lally. Um, and that morning, my phone was off and it was on the charger, and I didn't realize that it was off. And I'm going around the house. I'm doing housework. I'm doing this, that, and like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm like, boy, bird stuff's been really quiet today. So I picked up my phone. I'm like, oh, turned it on, and boom, I got hit with an avalanche of Ross's Gull messages and people being like, we're coming to pick you up. Where are you? Pick up your phone. What's going on? And the
That's why you don't turn
backstory,
your phone off when you charge it,
I
Craig. I
I
think like there's
didn't.
a very easy solution to this problem.
I had turned it off the night before because the ABA website was getting slammed by hackers in the middle of the night, and it pings my phone when that happens. So I'm like, all right, it's being
You
taken
can blame
care
the
of.
hackers.
Anyways, so the story here is about the Ross's Gull, but the last third of it is about my failure to see a Ross's Gull in Illinois for 45 years.
Yeah.
So that was
a
pretty
good
funny.
opportunity. It's a big opportunity that you missed there, Greg.
That was pretty funny.
Yeah, beautiful photos. The bird turned up in Indiana as well, if I recall. But the
Well,
border is very close there.
yeah. So the when uh, when you're standing there at that park,
Mm-hmm.
the Indiana border is like 300 yards offshore.
Oh, right. That's
So
how. Oh, that's what they count when they said, "Oh, it flew into Indiana." That's what they were talking about. Boy,
exactly. So people
that's
go there. I
technical.
mean, it's a place where you can get birds in both, and it's a
Yeah.
really good place to bird. Um, yeah, I want to say hi to Jane, Judy, and Joshua. Susan from Illinois. Clifford is here. Susan Nelson
Cliff.
and Elise want to say hi to everybody joining us now.
Yeah, we got folks in YouTube chat too. Sarah Coffee, hello. 2 to 4 inches of snow. Not, I guess spring's not in Wisconsin yet. Scott Hickman, Brent Schoenberg notes that they avoided the headline "Birders flock" too. So good for you.
Yes, they
Birders
did. Well,
rejoice.
birders
Or
rejoice, and
joyful.
I will say, as I was just telling you, Nate, before we started here, Chicago Tribune is kind of unique in that they actually have a birding team. They have an actual birder who's a reporter and a photographer that they pair together and that does birds, and they if there's a birding story and they actively seek birding stories, they send this birding team out to cover it, and it's pretty remarkable for a major city newspaper.
Yeah. Marsha Balestri says almost as cool as the red-footed booby in North Carolina, and asked if I saw it. I did not. That's a story about that.
Dip,
So
dip, dip,
the
dip.
story of the red-footed. Yeah, well, I didn't even try because, well, this is why.
Oh yeah.
I'm about an hour and 15 minutes away from where that bird was seen, and when the news came out over the rare bird group me chat, everyone was like, "You got to come and see it fast." The work, because they're doing some work on the boardwalk at that park. They're like, the workers are coming back at 1 o'clock, and it was 12:15. So I did the math, and I could not get to the park in the time before the workers came back, and they did flush the bird at that point, and the bird was gone and never seen again. So I did not see that one. I did not leave my house when it was, though I was sorely tempted to. There's no way I could have made that hour and 15 minutes in the 45 minutes before they got there. That would have been faster than my car is physically capable of going. So I missed that one. That's happened. We all have stories of dips, Greg. It may be 45 years before we get another red-footed booby in North Carolina. Well, maybe
Yeah.
not. With climate change the way it is, we'll probably get more of them before the time.
Yeah, I mean, and Ross's Gull is one of those enigmatic species that is completely unpredictable. I mean, there's a few places where they breed, and if you go way up into the Arctic, Baffin Island, Siberia, and northern Alaska, yeah, you can get them at the right time of year in the right place.
Yeah.
But they show. I mean, there's a record from the Salton Sea. There's, they're just one of these weird birds.
There's a couple of SoCal records that are sort of bizarre. No, I'm sorry. I was going to say there's a Georgia record, but that was an ivory gull, the other Arctic wandering gull species.
That is also enigmatic, and they kind of winter in the same places.
The same places.
There's
some places in Alaska you can get both.
Yeah, and Ross's Gull is one of these birds. It never comes south of the Arctic Circle unless there's a problem.
Yeah.
So yeah. And Heidi McCulloch says there's a Lewis's woodpecker in southeast Missouri.
That's a good bird for Missouri.
And that's a really good bird anywhere. That is one of
This has
the
been an
most.
interesting year for Lewis's woodpecker. I recall there being one in Minnesota late last year. Is that correct? Is
Yeah, and I
somewhere in the
think
upper Midwest.
and I think there's
Um,
still one continuing that's been there
I
all
think there
winter
was
in
there was may have
Ontario.
been one in Eastern Canada too. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. That's probably the one I'm thinking of. Yep.
yeah. Our board member Paul Riss went and got that bird.
Oh, nice. Good for him. Yeah.
Yeah. So
A lot of stories of people seeing good birds that aren't us, Greg.
yeah, you know what I will say that standing there for 3 or 4 hours at the Steelworkers Park on the south side of Chicago, waiting for the Ross's gull that didn't show up, there was a constant stream of red-breasted mergansers and horned grebes, and there was a pair of surf scoters that came in real close,
Well, so
and standing
nice
around with
birding experience nonetheless.
yeah, and standing around with 20 birders, just talking about birds and watching things fly in and out. It was a good experience. I mean, even when you miss the bird, going out birding is always a good experience.
Absolutely. Aaron Clement in YouTube says, "Does anyone know about an ABA birding festival in Toronto in late April?" Yes, actually, it's less a festival; it's more of a weekend. So the ABA is doing this year. We're going to try and do some various kind of birding weekend events around at a few places in the ABA area, including one in Toronto because we have board member Paul Ress there. And we'll probably partner with a local bird organization and do a couple bird walks over a weekend and a couple sessions like workshops in the afternoon, and then like a birds and beers. They're pretty simple, but it'll be an opportunity for folks in those areas to meet with ABA people and come out and bird with us a little bit. So that's a plan. We'll have more on that in a little bit. So hopefully those tend to come together pretty quickly. So keep an eye out for that, Aaron. And
aba.org/travel. Those things will
Yep,
be on that page.
we'll get them up soon.
Yeah, so we're running up
They're
on
free
the
too. They're free. They'll be free.
yeah, we're running up on a quarter past. We've been talking about
Yeah, let's
stuff.
do it, man.
Let's
I
get
didn't
into
think we
some
had enough to
birds
vamp
here.
about. So let's talk about some birds.
So yeah, this first one comes to us from Cottonwood, Arizona. We got a bit of a theme here today. We're going to have some swimming birds, quite a few swimming birds here.
Yeah, it's March. Swing
It's
birds are moving
March,
right now.
and exactly. And there's a bunch of swimming birds. There's ducks. There's loons. There's what this bird is, which is a grebe. There's phalaropes and all kinds of things. And really, they're fairly simple to put into buckets. I think once you get fairly familiar with the birds in your area, and grebes are pretty. The only thing you really might confuse it with, I think, would be a loon, and they're generally much smaller.
Yeah,
Um,
more compact, longer necks in comparison to the rest of their body. The bill is quite a bit daintier. Even in the larger grebes like Western grebe or Clark's grebe, the bill is kind of thin and narrow, whereas a loons tend to have kind of honking big steak knife kind of bills stuck on the front. But this is definitely a grebe. It's got
it's a
that
little,
tailless look.
yeah,
It's
little
got that
compact,
kind of
floofy
pointy
body.
bill.
Yep.
Yep, exactly.
So in Cottonwood, Arizona, um, the default small grebes would be pied-billed and eared,
Do they have
and
least grebes down there too? A few, but
you
not very
know,
many.
nah, yeah, that would be a good bird.
Mhm.
Um, and we're gonna cut to the chase here because I want to get to the comparison. This is an eared grebe, and the reason I picked this one is because this time of year is
Yes.
when we have the funky grebes
Funky
and
grebe season.
funky grebe season. And
Hmm.
so here we have on the left, this is a picture of two horned grebes I took last week at Steelworkers Park,
Hey.
and I've inserted our eared grebe from Arizona in here so that we can see sort of the overall gestalt differences. The first thing you'll notice is the bill shape.
Hmm.
You
Yeah,
know,
ear grebe has a very dainty, slender bill for a bird of that size. Where if you look at those horn grebes, both of them, the bill is much more like a baton. It's very thick and stays thick all the way out to
hmm
the very tip, and it gives the even at a distance, you're looking at a bird that shows a much more substantial shaped, sized bill than an eared grebe, which looks very dainty even
It
at a distance.
it does, and you know um, when you see these birds in the field together, you know it's hard to say one has a more compact body than the other because I mean you can see in these horned grebes, yeah, the body shape is kind of different because one's got its wings a little raised and a little fluffed up. But in general, eared grebe tends to be almost looks like a little round ball of floof with a neck and head on it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but the head shape, look at the difference in the head shape. The
Yeah,
eared grebe has this like almost straight forehead and a kind of almost triangular
very
peaked
vertical.
crown, which
Yep.
in breeding plumage really it's got like a almost like a perfect top knot. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and the last thing I wanted to point out, well, two things. One is the neck. You know, the European name for eared grebe is blackneck grebe, and so it
Mm-hmm.
tends to look very dark on the neck, with just a sort of a little white sliver of a cheek that's sometimes separated like a scoter. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Whereas horn grebe in winter plumage, as you can see on the left, has that big, bold, bright white cheek patch. Almost looks like a buffle head. But as they start molting, like the bird in front,
They get
um,
messy. Yeah.
they get messy, and you know you can see the difference there. You can see the eared grebe's golden ear patch is starting to come in, and that
Mm-hmm.
goes from the eye and sort of falls down, whereas the horn grebe it comes from the back of the eye and kind of flares up.
Fan. Yeah.
But as you noted from the very beginning, the bill is always key with these birds. And so Nate was talking about the shape of the bill, but look at how both of these horned grebes have little white tips on the bill.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
if you can
Alex
see
Cruz notes
them,
that in the comments.
yep,
If you can
if
see
you
the white
can see
tips, it's a
them,
horned. Yep.
yep, in all plumages, adult horned grebes have that little white tip to the bill, and if you're close enough where you can see that, that's a slam dunk ID mark for horned grebe. And the bird in question, the eared grebe, is on the right, does not have that.
Yep, I love this the photo of that eared grebe because you can actually see the legs sticking out
Yeah, look at how
beyond
far
it, the
back
very
they
end.
are.
Exactly. So a little bit of etymology corner for those who might be interested. Grebes are in the family Podicipediformes. So podiciped. So or Podiceps is the genus. Is that correct? I think that's right.
Yes.
Anyway, pod meaning feet, as in bipod, tripod, whatever, and seps meaning end, like biceps, your muscle, which has two ends, and triceps, which has three ends. So seps means ends. So podiceps means feet on the ends. So its feet are on the very, very ends of its body, which it looks because it practically has no tail to speak of.
Yeah, and if you go back to some of the Victorian artists and a little bit later, that drew grebes from specimens or painted them from specimens and never saw them in the wild,
Mm-hmm.
they drew them standing up like penguins, which
Yeah,
never happens.
yeah,
These birds
yeah. They usually
literally
don't.
they cannot walk on land.
No, they kind of push themselves up
Yeah.
onto their nests. They have these make these nests of floating vegetation, and they just kind of shove themselves up like penguins on their bellies, right? So they're basically doing the same thing. Some folks on the YouTube note that you don't see eared grebe too often in the East Coast, and that is true. It is an uncommon. Usually a pretty noteworthy bird, just most
Yeah.
places in the east, but it is regular enough that it's
Yeah, it
worth
is.
keeping an eye out for, especially this time of year when birds are really moving, and then throughout the winter. Where I live in the southeast, we get eared grebe on the large lakes every once in a while. Slightly more often off the coast. If you're looking on the coast, where you can see hundreds of horned grebes and maybe one eared grebe in a flock. So it's a good bird to keep on the lookout for. But there are some very eared grebe looking horned grebes around right now across much of the continent. So
Yeah.
keep that bill shape, head shape in mind when you're looking at grebes.
So we are going to go straight from grebes into what did I say they're most commonly confused with? What is this? These come from Scotland. Like I said, we do get birds from all over the
Scotland.
place.
Yeah.
This,
Well, we
yes,
have very similar birds in Scotland as we have in North America. At least the water birds are, as far as water birds are concerned,
A
especially
lot of
birds
them,
that can be found
yes.
in the ocean, because we do in fact share an ocean with
Yes, and
Scotland.
this bird here is found. I believe it's circumpolar or close to it. Um,
Yep,
I'm not sure.
whole
I should have
Arctic.
looked at that before I said it. Um, yes, whole Arctic. So we've got again two swimming birds. Thin bills. They don't really look like ducks. They don't have duck faces. Um, and
No,
these are loons, and
indeed, you
they
can
are
definitely see how much longer the body is
yes, and you
compared
can
to
see the
the
feet
grebe
in
that
the
we just looked at.
back in
Mm-hmm.
the bird in front, just like the grebe. It has legs way in the back. And in Europe,
Slightly more of a tail. Slightly more of a tail.
yeah, yeah. In Europe, loons are called divers. Um,
Good name.
and it is a good name because they certainly do dive. And,
Yeah.
so again, we're going to go straight to the comp and compare the loon species that we have because along with grebes, loons are moving right now, and there are loons
Mm-hmm.
all over the place in the ABA area and apparently in Europe, or at least Scotland. and
We don't go too much
um,
further north. Not
no,
much further.
actually,
Not many places for to go further north than Scotland. Pretty much
yeah.
ocean all the way to the ice cap.
So looking at these now four birds, the two birds in the original photo, which are the birds at the far left and the far right, are the same species, and the two in the middle are the two more common loon species in the ABA area.
In the ABA area, I was going to say one of them very much less so in the UK.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. And So the thing to note here, just as with the grebes, uh, is the bill size and the bill
Mm-hmm.
shape, and kind of the overall shape of the bird. So again, I think we're just going to cut to the chase here, and the birds in question are red-necked divers or red-throated loons,
Mm-hmm.
as we call them here, and the two birds that we are comparing them with are a common loon in the middle right and a
Great northern
Pacific loon,
diver.
great northern diver, and a Pacific loon on the
Pacific diver,
middle
I guess.
left, also known as Holy Crikey, get out and get this bird,
Yeah.
um, in
Do they
Europe.
say crikey? Do they say
I don't
crikey in
know.
Scotland?
No,
Yeah, that's really
that's
more of an
that's
Australian
yeah,
thing.
no, it's yeah, that's uh yeah, that's a Kraken twitch. Um,
Sure. Yeah.
so, um, the bill size, overall size. So look at the red throated loon on the right, how it's got that very white cheek, the thin bill, and you
Indeed, a
can
lot of white.
and you can see how the bill is upturned
Mm-hmm.
a little bit, kind of similar in shape to the eared grebe we saw a minute ago. Um, the common loon,
Sarah Coffey
which is
says,
kind of
"Holy
our
crumpets!"
holy crumpets, which is our default. That's good.
It's a thing now. We're
Um,
gonna make it. We're gonna make it a thing.
holy crumpets. Core blimey,
Core
exactly.
blimey. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, yeah. I gotta
Apologies to
keep
all
the
the
I gotta keep these things in mind as
British listeners.
I gotta practice. I gotta
Watchers.
practice this stuff before we go on.
Ach, Mom.
Uh, um,
Get your
so
bends on the wee diver.
the common loon. Look at just how massive that bird is. That's a big, heavy,
It's a
thick.
bulky
It's a
head, bulky
yeah,
body. The head, especially, it was just a big block head. Yeah.
yeah. And the Pacific loon on the left middle is it's got that almost serpentine neck. It's got a very clean pattern. You can see the little bit of the chin strap. It's got a little dark chin strap
Mm-hmm.
there. Um, and then the thinner bill. Now, common loon is variable in size, and some have bills approaching a big Pacific loon. But the
You
overall
mean
face
red-throated loon?
or no, Pacific.
Red-throated loon has a bill that resembles a Pacific loon, or can
Well,
resemble a
both.
Pacific loon. Both.
Both. And
Well,
it's funny
Pacific loon's
because
the
the
middle bill. We should say
Pacific
that.
loon is
Common
the
loon
middle
is
bill. I
big
mean,
and red-throated is the small,
they
and
can
Pacific's somewhere in the middle. Yeah.
they can get confusing on either end though, and
Yeah.
red-throated loon immatures don't show that bold pattern that both of these birds show. They tend to
Hmm.
be a little muddier, but you still
Exactly.
have
It's very wishy-washy.
yeah,
Yeah.
you still have that thin bill. And also note how both of these birds have their heads upturned, like they're looking up.
They're looking at something.
That is a red-throated loon characteristic. They swim with their bill in the air like that, and that's often a very good way to pick them out if you've got a big fly.
Funnily enough, when they
Big slopes.
fly, their neck like droops. So
Yes.
it's like below level. So when they're flying and you've got a loon that has its neck like really low, that's a red-throated, whereas a common loon is more of a straight line.
Yes. And so, yeah, there we have the three loons in the three common, uh, or I should say, expected loons in most of the ABA area.
David Becker asks in Facebook, how common is Arctic loon in Scotland? It's a
Yeah.
good question. I don't know. I can get my field guide to birds of Europe. Hold on.
If you've got it handy. Whoa, look at, wow, he just, okay, that's kind of
I
freaky,
have
man.
everything handy. I just got a bunch of new shelves in my office that have all my bird books in them, so I have everything at
I mean, just the way you
arm's
like
length.
kind of almost like disappeared into your wall. That was kind of,
Yeah, it's only like
that was
five
kind of
feet
great.
away. Yeah. So Arctic loon is black-throated diver or
Right.
black-throated loon. Yeah, it's definitely more common than Pacific. I'll say that in Scotland because they breed throughout Scandinavia and whatnot. So I'd imagine that they're somewhat regular in Scotland.
So there we go.
There you go.
And this one comes to us from California. And this, surprisingly enough, is one of the most commonly misidentified. So this is one of the most well-known birds in North America. Next to the bald eagle, I think this bird is probably the most well-known bird, at least in the United States, and I would say certainly almost in Canada
too.
as well.
Yeah, so it's hard to get a
So
sense
what
of
do we got?
exactly what kind of bird we're looking at here because it's so obscured by all the twigs. But I would say that this is probably a medium-sized bird. It's certainly not as large as a raptor, just because we're seeing a lot of those sort of spindly sort of twigs throughout the front here. It's very obscured, but there are some things I think that are important to note here. The yellowish bill. So the bill
Mm-hmm.
looks pretty much all yellow, at least the mandible, the bottom part of it. It's got a very
Mm-hmm.
clear white throat.
Mm-hmm.
It's got
You can
a
see some little black streaks in that throat.
indeed a nice eye ring there, or a broken eye ring at the very
Yep.
least. Gray all over, wings darker, then wings and tail flight feathers darker than the rest of the body. But yeah, I think a lot of people would probably be put this in a perching bird, medium-sized perching bird.
Yeah.
We're missing probably the most obvious field mark, the most
Well,
well-known field mark.
and that was what confused the person who posted it, who
Mm-hmm.
obviously was from the comments was very familiar with the species, but this threw them because the way the bird is sitting, we can't really see it's obscured enough that the person thought the bird was facing toward them. And it's
Oh yeah, okay. I can
actually
see that.
facing away, and we're
It
looking at
definitely
the
is.
bird's
Looking back.
back. I remember years ago at the old Illinois Birders Forum, there was a photograph like this of a
Hmm.
sandpiper, where one person, it was, I forget what kind of sandpiper it was, but they stuck to this ID because they were convinced they were looking at the bird's breast, and it was, when you looked at it for more than a little bit, it was kind of like that picture of the paper plates, where
Uh,
look for the one, they're all upside down except for one, and as soon as you find it, all of them are upside down and you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
And it's like
Yeah.
once you
The picture
realize
of
that
the,
no,
like, is it an old lady or is it a young woman or whatever? And once
exactly.
you, yeah.
And it's like once you realize that you were looking at this bird's back and not its bird's breast, you can't unsee it. And it was immediately
Mm-hmm.
obvious that this bird was misidentified for that reason. And so the person who posted this was like, well, people immediately said American robin, which is what this bird
Mm-hmm.
is. And the person who posted was like, I know what a robin, I'm paraphrasing here, I know what a robin is, and I've never seen one with a gray breast. There you go. If you
Yeah.
look really closely on the left shoulder, the left side to us,
Yeah.
which would be the bird's left shoulder, exactly, you can see some of the red breast
A
feathers
little bit.
poking out.
Yeah.
It's got its breast fluffed up. So yeah, this is an American robin, and it is
Female.
surprising.
Yeah.
Uh huh. It is surprising how many people get thrown by a robin when they can't see the red breast, or in younger plumage when it's going from that speckled and kind of greenish
Mm-hmm.
backed looking into the adult plumage like we have
Well,
here.
without the location in Coachella, California, this could be any number of almost identical Turdus thrushes that are found all around the world. Everywhere, pretty much everywhere on the planet, except Australia, there are thrushes of the genus Turdus, which is our
Yep.
American robin, that do more or less the exact same thing, no matter where they are. Like they're bopping around on suburban lawns and gathered in big flocks this time of year to migrate, and they're just familiar birds to everybody. If you go to, suburban San Jose, Costa Rica, you're going to see a clay-colored robin doing the same thing that you see an American robin doing, and it's doing the same thing that you see a African thrush doing in Kampala or whatever. Like these things are all, or a Eurasian blackbird
Yep.
in London. I mean, these birds all do more or less the same thing. They all are shaped more or less the same way. The only difference is the wherever the red and the gray are on them.
And in our the presentation about the Southern Ocean that Ted Floyd did in the Falklands, you have the austral thrush,
Austral thrush, yeah,
which looks like sort of
like an American robin
it
with a
looks like
gray
an American
breast.
robin
Yeah,
clay colored thrush hybrid. And Alex Cruz Jr. asked, some people call clay colored robin clay colored thrush. I believe that is the official name according
yeah.
to
I
the
may have called
ABA
it clay colored
checklist
robin. I apologize
AOU.
for that. It's been
Um,
both various points in my birding life.
do you ever think that American robin will ever? Do you think American robin will ever be changed to American thrush or migratory thrush? I doubt it. American
I
robin is
doubt it.
one
It
of
probably
the
should be, but
most. I mean, if you're going to get technical, but I don't have a problem with American robin. It's easily understood why it's called American robin, and
yeah, it's
it's just
probably
such a beloved bird and a beloved name that I just that's
it's definitely on the short list of birds that are familiar to people who have never even cared about looking at a bird before. There's only a handful of birds that are like that, and it's definitely one of them, at least in North America.
yeah, yeah, and they're so prevalent in everybody's backyard, just about everywhere. They're wonderful, wonderful birds. So yes, this is an adult female American robin. Swimming birds again.
Ducks, ducks, ducks.
Ducks, ducks,
Oh,
ducks,
I
ducks,
mean, do
ducks.
we know why
Oh, we
these are
gave it
ducks?
away. Yes, these are ducks. And we
Yep,
know they're ducks. We know they're ducks by those big, thick duck bills.
big old bill.
They don't call the duck-billed platypus because the
It's not
bill
the
on it looks like a grebe.
platypus billed bird. Yeah.
Yeah,
Excuse me. Yeah, so these are different from the grebes and the loons that we have looked at earlier, largely because of the bill that's sort of large and flat and blunt, as compared to kind of sharp and long to the that the fish eating grebes and loons have. Also, the head and neck is also quite different. They don't have the kind of serpentine neck that you typically associate with loons, and especially grebes. It's all kind of clumped together into a shape that is very much immediately recognizable as duck, even to people
yeah.
who do not know ducks at all. So, yep,
And
this is a
and
duck.
kind of and kind of diving into the ducks a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Was that a reference to the bird that we're looking at here?
Yeah, I mean, I thought you'd get a little more
No, I
happiness
saw
out
what
of
you're
that.
doing there. I just didn't know whether it was
You just
intentional or
weren't
not.
going to acknowledge it for me. That's fine.
I'll
Um,
let it go.
so we have two sort of big buckets of ducks.
Yeah,
Um,
duck
dabbling ducks
ducats,
and
if you will.
duckets, dabbling ducks and diving ducks. And dabbling ducks, like a mallard, they're
Hmm.
kind of big bodied and buoyant, and they sit high on the water. And when they feed, they kind of tip and their butts come up and they look for stuff in shallow water. And then we have birds like these, which are kind of lower in the water, a little more streamlined. And these
Hmm.
birds are built for diving, which is how they feed. They can dive sometimes to incredible depths. Um,
Yep, there's a number of different diving duck genera.
yeah,
You're probably familiar with Ithia, which is the scaup and ringneck duck of a certain type. There's also Bucephala, which are the kind of another big one, which include bufflehead and this duck, this group of ducks, which
yeah,
are as you look very clearly at it, there's one very obvious field mark that stands out above all others, and that is the eye, the bright yellow piercing eye, which places these ducks as golden eyes. Golden
yes.
eyes. Golden
By the
eyes.
way,
Golden eye ducks.
Susie Ingram says "Buckets of Ducks" makes a great band name. I would
Buckets of
agree.
ducks.
Um, I did one of my the band name that I have sort of
Maybe a
in reserve
children's
is
band name.
Catch Basin Sardines. Um, anyways, yes, we tangent here. Have you noticed that? That's what we do. Um,
Yeah.
so yes, these are Goldeneye, and as we've been doing, I didn't have to make a Crosley comp here. By the way, I was doing these before him, um, and because these birds did it all themselves, and so we have our two species of Goldeneye in this picture, and um, my earphone just talked to me. Um,
Oh, is it
so
dying?
the two birds in front are a different species from the bird in the back on the right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what do you see in there?
Yeah, so there's some very clear differences between those birds. For starters, there's a lot more orange in the bill of the first two birds, whereas the bill is
Yeah,
largely, if not entirely, black in the bird in the back. And also, I think it's noteworthy that the shape of the head is a little bit different too. I mean, the bird in the
it's
back has a peak that's kind of behind. It's towards the back of the bird. So like a tri. Well, they're both kind of triangular shaped, and that's very much a goldeneye sort of trait. If you're looking at golden eyes at a distance, they have that big old triangular head that
mm-hmm.
stands out. But the peak on the bird in the front is towards the front, giving the front of the face, that sort of forehead, a much more vertical look than the bird in the back.
So now a bit of nuance, and this is I like this picture
Mm.
too because these two species telling them apart. These are females, by the way. The males are slam dunk different in breeding plumage. They're very easy to tell apart. In juvenile plumage, they can be quite difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But these are female birds. These are adult females,
Mm-hmm.
and the the short kind of stocky yellow bill of the bird in front is a key field mark for
Mm-hmm.
Barrow's goldeneye, which is what
Yep.
those two birds on the left are, and we have a common goldeneye on the right. And you'll notice how the common goldeneye, the bill, in addition to being black, it's longer and kind of more.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't know what you would call that shape. It's kind of the same difference between a Canada
It's
goose
like
and a
a
cackling goose. Um,
isosceles triangle.
yeah, I mean,
No,
and it and it
scaling.
and
Scaling.
it
Scaling.
slopes into the forehead much more
Mm-hmm.
smoothly. If you look at the Barrow's
Yeah.
goldeneye in the middle, you can see
There's
how
like
it
a
has that
hitch
kind
right
of
there where the bill meets the
steep
forehead.
forehead. Now,
Yeah.
the two birds on the left have very different head shapes, and that's
Mm-hmm.
because the one on the left, and this is the nuance I was talking about, and this happens a lot with scaup, um,
Mm-hmm.
is the bird on the left has been feeding, it's been diving, and its
Mm-hmm.
head feathers are wet and slicked back and slicked down. And the bird in the middle has a dry head. So we can really see, if you read the field guides about Barrow's goldeneye, you'll see that their head shape is often referred to as like having a mane. So you see that
Mm-hmm.
big sort of tuft coming off the back of the head, and you can sort of imagine it being slicked down on the bird on the far left. And you know, as Nate said, the sort of difference in the shape of the head, where the
Mm-hmm.
bird in the far left has got the peak on top, versus sort of a rounded, sort of maybe I don't know, it's a little flatter, you might say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's important to note the structure of the head and the structure of the bill too, because while it looks like it would be a very easy identification for these birds, because the bill on the Barrow's goldeneye is so orange. I mean, that's something that's
Right.
going to stand out at a great distance. There are common goldeneye females that can have pretty significant orange on the bill as well, to the extent that there is a little bit of overlap,
Absolutely.
or there can be a little bit of overlap. So if you're trying to pick a common or a Barras out of a flock of what is predominantly the other species, you're going to want to, I mean, the orange is going to lead you to that direction. It's going to be the first thing you might notice when you're looking at those birds, but it can't be the only thing that's going to drive the identification. You're going to want to have
No.
some supplementary stuff, namely the head shape, namely the bill shape, that sort of thing. That's going to help you on that ID. So you can't rely on the bill color all the time, but it definitely
Right.
is a step in the direction towards the identification that you're looking for.
And if they're together, Barrow's goldeneye tends to look a little bit smaller and more compact than
Mm-hmm.
common goldeneye.
Mm-hmm.
It may be, I'm not sure if it's actual or an optical illusion of some sort, but
Mm.
that's generally the feeling that I get when looking at the two of them.
Yeah, I've only ever seen the two together in one time, which was up in the winter, up in the Northeast, up in Massachusetts, where common goldeneye is quite common, and there are small numbers of Barrow's goldeneye kind of mixed in with them. So definitely, what you're looking for, as I said, the first thing you're going to look for is that orange bill, and then you're going to want to go from there to look for the other stuff too. So
Yeah, Barrow's goldeneye is kind of interesting in that it's something has its range is kind of split like Harlequin duck.
yeah, yeah,
It breeds in the western mountains, and
cavity nesters.
up into
Goldeneyes are
the
cavity
Arctic
nesting birds.
in the west, and then it also breeds in the Northeast, in like Newfoundland
Mm-hmm.
and up into Labrador, and those two populations are separate.
Yeah. And also goldeneyes. Oh, never mind. We'll move
Oh,
on
go
from
ahead.
goldeneyes. The wings, they make a lot of noise when they fly, which is really
Oh yeah, they
distinctive.
do. They whistle when they fly.
Yeah. Whistle wings. That's an old hunter name for them.
Daytona Beach, Florida.
Tony
It is getting to
Beach.
be
Is
that
this bird
time of
on like
year.
the speedway,
I guess.
like the NASCAR track or something?
It's funny. I was
Yeah.
looking at the bird. I didn't even pay attention to the tires back there. But yeah, what do
Yeah.
we got?
Dangerous place for a bird to be. We've got a small perching bird here, Greg. Very skinny legs, very skinny feet, kind of longish tail,
Mm-hmm.
normal small bill, a little bit of yellow there underneath the tail there, but overall kind of plain grayish brown. It's hard to get a
Oh,
lot
look at.
out of this bird because of the quality of the photo, but there should be enough
Ah,
here to
but
get an ID.
you could still tell. I mean, there's no question what this bird is. And look at Heidi McCullough playing our little game with us. She says, "Florida, hubby once saw one of these by the gas pumps in all cap in
I
Florida once."
saw what you
And
did there.
yeah, that is a reference to a key field mark of this species, in that it bobs or pumps its tail. Um,
Indeed.
but the thing that stands out here is it looks like it has a dark cap, kind of a pale
Mm-hmm.
supercilium or eyebrow. Otherwise, it's just kind of brown and gray and kind of nondescript, but it's got that yellow wash on the undertail coverts and the rear belly. And those three things, pumping the tail, yellow on the undertail, and the head pattern, give it away as a
Parking lot warbler. It's a palm warbler. It
it
is
is a
a
palm
palm
warbler.
warbler. They are dirt common in Florida
They
throughout the
are.
winter, walking around in people's lawns. It's the one place where they actually are palm warblers, where they hang around near palms. This is a species of bird that breeds in the boreal. It's one of their earlier migrating warblers, so they should be moving through your area here in the next couple weeks. We usually get them in second, third week of April, before all the other warblers start to come through.
Absolutely.
And they are, yeah, the tail pumping is the big thing. One of their old colloquial names is wagtail warbler,
Mm-hmm.
which refers to the fact that they're always bobbing their tail when they're walking around on the ground, which is also another unusual thing for a warbler. They like to stay close to the ground or on the
They
ground.
stay, yeah, they stay close to the ground. They like to walk around on lawns and stuff like a
Mm-hmm.
wagtail.
Yeah, exactly. And that fine bill, as Jim Neitzel says in YouTube, um, would differentiate it from some of the other birds you might see doing a similar sort of thing, like sparrows. Long legs, kind of thin bill. That's a warbler more than a sparrow. And red-winged blackbird would even have a thin bill and would be quite a bit larger. No yellow, not a lot of yellow, I should say. Not certainly not under the tail. For a red-winged blackbird, it might be some yellow wash kind of up around the face or something. But
Yeah, but little orangish wash around the face, but
little
that the
orangish, yeah.
yellow, the yellow on the undertail coverts and just the overall drabness of this bird. Now, if it was a little bit, if the picture were a little bit better and the sun was out a little bit more, we had a little bit better light on it, we'd see that the
Mm-hmm.
back it looks kind of gray brown here, but it's actually got some olive, and the
Mm-hmm.
rump is um, is kind of a bright olive green. And when this bird flies, it has bright white corners to the
Yeah.
outer tail feathers. And so as you're walking along and you see this bird fly in front of you, you see this kind of flash of bright olive with these white, almost junco-like flashes of white
Mm-hmm.
on the tail as it
We
flies
should also
away.
point out we should also point out that there are two subspecies of palm warblers, or two
Yes,
two
and in Florida,
populations of palm warblers in Florida. In the winter, I want to say this is the western one. So the western
yeah,
one is the plain one, the all brown underneath, or all kind of whitish beige underneath, and not a lot of color on it. There's another population that comes. I think they winter a little bit further south down into the Caribbean. You can correct me. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong about that, but it's the eastern palm warbler, also called the yellow palm warbler.
yep,
They're very bright yellow, kind of all across the breast, and even the color on the back is kind of washed with like a yellow, and the rufous
mm-hmm,
cap is much more predominant. It's a very very pretty bird, and they usually they don't migrate. Their peaks are slightly different. There's a little bit of overlap, but for the most part, the western ones migrate first, and by the western, I mean they breed from like boreal Ontario west, into Canada, and
yep.
the yellow ones will breed in eastern Canada and northern Quebec and whatnot.
Yeah, the only place I've seen the yellow ones were in Florida in winter,
Mm.
and definitely outnumbered by the western birds.
Yeah, there's a lot of those plain ones. We definitely get more of those for sure. Oh, my backyard. At a
Yeah.
brick? Is this like a brick
I
factory or
guess
something
it's a
like that? A Home Depot or a Lowe's or a
it's a
hardware store or something?
it's a garage bird. This bird was found in someone's garage,
Yeah.
which happens a lot with this particular species.
Yeah,
It
this is
why
definitely a borb, Greg.
Yeah, it is, and it's got some big feet.
Yeah, real
It's
big
got a
feet.
long bill. Kind of looks like a chickenish, but the feet are too big and the bill is too long.
Feet's too big.
So what are you thinking here?
Yeah, so not a lot of habitat clues to go
No,
with
not at all.
on this bird. But that's par for the course for this thing. Big, round, long, strong legs, big, long feet. This is a bird that spends a lot of time in water. I think you can discern that from the
It
long
is a
legs
wading
and
bird. Look at those long
weird
legs.
feet. Yeah, long bill as well. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to, it's hard to with absent any sort of habitat clues. This can be an absolutely tough one, and I understand why someone would be confused by this. But
Well, the
this is
person who
actually,
posted asked if maybe it had escaped from the zoo.
yeah, yeah, because this is not a bird that if you're not looking for it, you don't tend to encounter. This is
No,
a
but
bird
they
that
are quite common.
you have to make an effort for. Absolutely. So this is going to be in your field guide in the rails. So this is a marsh bird. This is a rail, one of the
Mm-hmm.
rallus rails, which are the kind of the long-billed rails, of which there are three species. All three of which have been found in garages in North Carolina, if I recall correctly over the years. But the fact that this has got what looks like kind of very dark rufous body and a grayish face places it as our smallest one. This is a Virginia rail,
Yes,
very
the
common in the Carolinas, both as a breeder and as a migrant, but not frequently encountered because that's a rail. They're very secretive,
they're
except when
very
they end up in
secretive.
people's garages.
They tend to be a bit nocturnal,
Mm-hmm.
and rails are interesting birds, I mean, for all kinds of reasons. But one of the things that's most interesting is they appear to be very weak flyers. So when you're walking
Mm-hmm.
by a marsh, if you happen to flush one up from the edge of a marsh, they just kind of flutter up and then flutter back down again, and
Yeah, drop
it
down
takes
about 20 feet away. Yeah.
all the effort that they have just to go that 20 feet. But these things get around. They Rails
Yeah.
show up all over the place. And if you start looking at endemic birds on islands out in the middle of the ocean, it's like there's rails everywhere. And these birds can fly, they go great distances, and during migration, they show up in some of the most bizarre places. I
Yeah,
got my
rails are known for
lifer
that.
I got my lifer yellow rail inside the revolving door of a hotel in Chicago.
There's a somewhat famous or infamous rather photo of a yellow rail that was underneath the seats at Wrigley Field.
Yes,
Like
I
someone had
yes.
taken a photo of it during a Cubs game this time
Yep.
of year, the big beginning of the baseball season,
It
and
was
it was
like
like
opening day or right around there.
tucked underneath the seat because it had put down and it didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
Rails are notorious for this, and I want to say, and this may be a Chicago thing. You definitely would know this, Greg. The Chicago City Peregrine Falcons are extremely, like, shockingly adept at hunting migratory rails to the extent that they have found like various rail parts in the nests far more commonly than people report rails. Birders report rails in the city.
Well,
Maybe
I'm
it
gonna.
might not be
I mean,
Chicago, but it's another city.
I would say that is probably true. I don't know that anecdote off the top of my head, but
Mm-hmm.
I will say, and my take on this might not be everybody's take, but since the reintroduction of peregrines, especially at
Mm-hmm.
places like Montrose Point, that pair of peregrines that live at Montrose Point are just killing machines. I mean, somebody found another barn owl carcass on the beach. I mean,
God,
anything at sunrise when migrants come in off the lake, those peregrines are
yeah.
just waiting there, and it's just bam, bam, bam.
They probably have the most varied diet of any peregrine falcon pair
I mean,
in the continent.
that's like the third barn owl that's been killed by peregrines at Montrose Beach
Falcons do not get
in the
along with
last few
owls,
years.
that's for sure. Yeah,
No,
so
they do
Virginia
not.
rail, they are quite common in any sort of marshy area, even areas that you would not expect Virginia rails to be at, like even sort of
Yeah.
ephemeral stuff, retention ponds with a few cattails. Like they are shockingly good at finding that sort of stuff, especially in migration. So they put down and they get confused and they just kind of hunker down until nighttime and then they take
Yep.
off again. So but Virginia rail is hardly the only rail that this happens to. We have records in North Carolina, in particular, of even birds that we would have expected to be exclusively coastal, like clapper rails, to be found like well inland. At
Yeah.
during migration, like who knows where they're coming from, who knows where they're going, but they've been photographed and or they hit windows or they end up in people's garages or whatever. It's rails are one of the weirdest birds when it comes to vagrancy and turning up in odd places,
They
and just
are.
in terms of their mysteriousness, how mysterious they are, I suppose is a better way to say that. There's not a
So
lot we know about where they're going.
Susie Ingram asks about the bill color. Now, if you're looking at your field guide along with us,
Mm-hmm.
you'll notice that the field guides point out that Virginia rail has a reddish bill, and this bird clearly
Mm-hmm.
does not. But if you look at the base of the bill, you can see a little peach coloration right where the bill meets the face. And
Mm-hmm.
that's because we're looking at the top ridge. We're looking at the culmen of this bird's bill. Well, it's not the culmen, it's just the
Mm-hmm.
top ridge, the top of the bill. It's
Mm-hmm.
facing us. So if this bird was more in profile and we could see
Yeah.
the shape of the bill a little bit better in a side view, you would see that, I don't know, half of the bill has that kind of orangish peachy color to the
Yeah.
mandible.
Yeah, and the reason this isn't a clapper rail or a king rail is that gray face, that very gray
The
face that is
very gray
very
face that
very
contrasts.
different from the body itself. Some of the other large rails have a grayish face, but the body tends to be paler, more orangey, almost apricot in some cases, and they are there's less of a contrast, as Greg says. Um,
And they have
as
thicker
Virginia, which is a
bills.
dark rail. Yeah, they tend to be lankier too. They don't like
Mm-hmm.
to kind of hunker up like this in a ball. Oh, we got one more. Oh man. All right.
I
That's
think we might have two more. I'm not
Oh,
sure.
yeah, that's right. We do. We gotta stop rambling, Greg. We
Yeah,
gotta
that's
get to it.
whatever. Well,
All right.
so Houston, Texas. It quacks like a duck. Houston, we got a duck. What's going on
We got a
here?
duck. Why is this duck perched on a power line, Greg?
The first time I
I mean,
saw
I guess
that,
it's a duck. It's shaped like a duck.
it's
But
shaped
there
like a
are some
duck.
things that don't make it look like sort of the ducks that we've been talking about earlier. The neck is very long. The
Yeah,
legs are very long. The whole thing is like a some sort of weird combination of a duck and a goose, and that just I mean that is a as good a description as any for a group of ducks that we have here in the ABA area called whistling ducks. We have a couple different species of
yes.
whistling ducks. They are arboreal. They like to perch in trees, which is very strange for a duck. The whistling ducks and wood duck are really the only ducks that I can think of that like to
And
do that
that,
regularly.
as
Although we do
Susan
have some other
Nelson
cavity
points out,
nesting ducks.
as Susan Nelson points out, they used to be called tree ducks.
They used to
Um,
be called tree ducks. Yeah,
and
in the
yes,
old
they
field
are
guides, they were called
arboreal.
tree ducks. Yep.
And in Houston, Texas, you have both species of commonly encountered whistling
Mm-hmm.
ducks in the south. You have the black-bellied and the fulvous,
Mm-hmm.
and both, while they're both capable of perching up on a wire. Now, I will say, in Harlingen, Texas, you drive through the neighborhoods looking for parrots on the parrot trip, you will see hundreds of black-bellied whistling ducks sitting up on the
So many
wires.
of them. So
It's
many of them.
crazy.
Yeah.
They're like starlings, but they're ducks perched up on the
They're
wires.
massive. Yeah.
Um, and we'll cut to the chase here. This is a black-bellied whistling duck, and we can tell that from the fulvous whistling duck by the pinkish bill, which we can see in this
Mm-hmm.
picture, the gray face, the belly is dark, and it's got that big, bold white wing
Big
patch.
white flash in the wing. That is definitely
Yeah,
a black-bellied whistling duck thing. They have a massive white wing stripe, which you can see wherever they are. They like to fly around and find places to perch. South Texas, South Florida is full of whistling ducks, predominantly black-bellied whistling ducks. It is kind of funny. The each species of whistling duck seems to have its day in the sun, where they are the most common one. And it wasn't all that long ago that fulvous whistling duck was the one that people would see most commonly. But in the last few
well,
couple
I
decades, it has been absolutely black-bellied whistling ducks everywhere.
when I
They
I
wander
mean
too. They
we've said
vagrate all
that
over the place.
we have said this, but we've talked about that before here. When I started birding a long time ago, you had to go to the Rio Grande Valley to see this species, and
Mm.
maybe up the Texas
It was
coast a little
noteworthy.
bit.
I remember getting my life
And
for black-bellied whistling duck at a little pond south of San Antonio back in
and
the
this
90s.
species is unbelievably expansionary right now. I mean, it is now an
So many of 'em.
expected. It is an expected breeding
Yeah.
species in Illinois, and I mean up
Yeah.
into central Illinois. And
Yeah,
we
they've
get
been moving in the Carolinas as well.
it's crazy how these birds, the first really warm push of spring in mid-April, and all of a sudden there will be whistling ducks all over Indiana, Illinois, Southern Ohio,
Mhm.
Missouri. It's
They've
crazy.
they've gone as far as Atlantic Canada. I think there's
Yeah,
whistling duck records in Nova Scotia, Quebec. They're
and they
they're
travel in
way
flocks, so it's
over
rare
there.
that you see
Mhm.
just one. You usually see like a
Yeah, you
half a
get a
dozen or
group of
more.
six. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're wild. I was in South Carolina last summer, and even I don't even bird South Carolina all that often, and even in the time that I can remember, in the last 5 years, they're now all over the place in the southern part, in the southern coast,
Yeah,
and moving up the coast. Um,
and
they're
what's
they're
interesting,
amazing their ability
and what's
to get
interesting
out.
before we got to move on here quickly, but
Yeah,
Neotropic cormorant, which is another
yeah,
Rio
similar sort of
Grande Valley
species. Yeah.
specialty back in the day, are now breeding in the Midwest, and they're all over the
Hmm.
place.
Yep.
And
Woo,
so yeah,
woo.
we're
It's
gonna
2 o'clock, Greg.
push
It's two
on here. We
o'clock.
got
We
the
gotta go.
we got we got the last one. We got the last one. Can we do the last
All
one?
right.
All
Tiny,
right,
tiny perching bird. Look how small those legs and feet are, and how
look at them.
tiny that bill is, and how long those wings are, Greg.
Yeah, and the bird next to it also has really long wings, and they're sitting up on a wire. Um,
Yeah.
and
And
you know
that wire looks
that's
huge. So this is a
yeah,
small
it
bird.
does. These are small birds, and these are swallows, and we
Yep.
can see the bird on the right is kind of dark all over and bright white
Mm-hmm.
underneath, and we can see
Couple
that
species of
bright
swallows
white
here.
cheek patch. Um, so this is a tree swallow on the right, but
On
the
the
bird
right.
in question is the one in the middle, and there's two species in the ABA area that look like this, and so yeah, this is a kind of a bad, quickly done comp here, but here they are, and the key points are is the head and the face. Now this is an it's similar in juvenile plumage, but we have our two buffy rumped swallows here. So if you look in the field guides, we have two swallows that have kind of chestnutty buffy rumps, and that's the cliff
Mm-hmm.
swallow and the cave swallow. And look at how dark the cliff swallow on the right, how dark that head is. It's got dark
Mm-hmm.
auriculars, the ear patch, and the brightest part of the head is that kind of whitish forehead crescent. Now compare that to the cave swallow on the left. It's got pale auriculars and a real definite
Mm-hmm.
capped look to the bird.
Yep.
Um,
Very, very pale bird, very like a washed out cliff swallow a lot of times.
yep,
And the rump is much more kind of warmly colored than it is on a cliff swallow, which they can appear kind of grayish.
it is. And when you see them together, cliff swallow is a big bird, I believe, except for the purple martin. I believe it's our biggest swallow.
Yeah, it's chunky.
And it is. It's chunky and thick. And cave swallow um, is a rather petite bird. So if you see them side by side, that's another good clue.
Yeah, it's
But
interesting. Sibley notes that the length and the wingspan are more or less the same on those birds, but cave swallow is about 30% smaller in mass
yeah,
than cliff swallow. So that's the sort of thing that you're going to see that's going to make it look smaller, even though the absolute measurements of like the wing and
well, I think you can see here now. The bird on
length
the
are going to
right
be a
is
little bit different.
molting, so it's not a fair comparison. But I mean, the cave swallow has longer wings,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, it's but yeah, when you do see them side by side, it's a smaller bird. But the cave swallow, the cave swallow in the middle there on the left of the two birds there, the pale auricular and that capped look is what you're looking for
Yeah, it's a
with the
great time
cave
of year to
swallow.
see cave swallows on the East Coast. There are a lot of people reporting them up and down the Southeast on the coast. There's a Caribbean population of cave swallow that's a little bit different than the cave swallows that people see in the south central part of the continent.
Mm-hmm.
And it tends to kind of wander a little bit this time of year. And there's flocks of swallows that are moving northward. And so, definitely something to keep an eye out for if you see a light rumped swallow and you're on the coast in Florida or Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina,
And
places like that.
cave swallow is another Texas bird that
Mm-hmm.
you had to go to a couple of actual caves to see this bird back in the day, and then they started breeding in culverts. Um,
Yeah, exactly. I
and
was going to say underpasses.
yeah, underpasses and culverts, and now they're breeding in Oklahoma um, and spreading, and you can find them in the fall. They migrate through the Great Lakes sometimes in November. Um, so that is it. We have ticked over the 1 o'clock hour, and
2 o'clock for me.
it is 2 o'clock, noon, 11 o'clock.
Wherever you are, wherever you are.
Wherever
We've been
you
at this
are.
for an hour. Folks, if you enjoy what we do here, please consider joining the American Birding Association. We are a membership organization. We run more or less on your memberships. We enjoy talking about birds with you and putting these sort of presentations on. We're going to be doing more of them and more varying topics as the year goes on. We've got
Yep.
a lot of fun stuff planned going forward this year. So if you want to be kept abreast of all the doings for the ABA, please join the American Birding Association. You'll get our magazines, our newsletters, all that stuff. We will be back in a couple weeks, schedule permitting. Obviously, it's hard to tell exactly what we're going to be doing in 2 weeks, but we try to do this every 2 weeks. If you would like to get a little bit of a heads up when we do it. Go to our website, aba.org, go down, scroll down to the bottom, and sign up for our newsletter, Flight Calls, and we'll keep you going. And
Yep,
otherwise, thanks everybody for joining us. This has been a lot of fun. We enjoy doing it. Anything else
we
you wanted
do.
to add, Greg? Is there something
No,
we
I
forgot?
think you hit all the points.
Right on. All right. We'll be back in a couple weeks. Please check out aba.org/join. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.
Take it easy, folks, and good
Bye bye.
birding.
Good birding.